What's up, everyone, and welcome to The Marketing Grind, a marketing show fueled by caffeine. Mack and Gary, back again, episode 2, and we got a good show for you this week. Today we're going to be talking about why your business needs to be developing a show as part of its content strategy. But before we get into the marketing talk, we got to get into the coffee. It's all about the coffee. Mac, what's in your mug today?
Not a mug today, it's a glass. It's almost happy hour as we film this, so I'm not drinking a cup of coffee. I opted for Beachwood, Tovarish. This is a Russian Imperial Espresso Stout with coffee, chocolate, vanilla, cinnamon, and serrano chili. Sounds very complex and interesting. I've been sitting on this one for a while, so excited to drink it.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, you're cheating, first and foremost, by drinking beer.
Got coffee
Second, I actually just finished brewing this. So it's been cold brewing for the past 24 hours. This is a new bean that I just got from Groundwork. It's called Black Gold. Ooh. And tasting notes on it, it's a dark roast, dark chocolate, toasted hazelnut, red fruit. So got to give it a whirl, right?
Do it up. Cheers.
Ooh, it's roasty, man. It's really good.
Ooh, mine's chocolatey. Not so much coffee as I thought it would be, and not too much spice from the chili, so I think it's kind of settled. I think I've had this can for like 2 or 3 years, so definitely mellowed out over the years, but hey, still good, and it's a high ABV, so I'm just going to sip it throughout this one.
Nice. All right. Well, let's get into today's show. Kick things off for us. We're going to be talking about, developing a show for a business content strategy. What do you got? Why do you think that's important these days?
I'm all about content these days, and I think you need to create really interesting, entertaining, informational content. And I think an episodic show does that. I mean, what are we doing right now? We're creating a show for digital marketing. And so depending
it's
very
meta right now.
So super meta, but depending on what your business does, what you sell, there's definitely a topic that you can create a show around. And first of all, you got to determine what kind of show works best for your business, given what resources you have. Some companies have maybe some in-house production resources to do video content, so like a video show like this. A podcast is one of the easiest things to start up. Back when I was at Flowcast, we were in the early stages of conceiving a sitcom type show that weren't pushing the Flowcast product at all, but it was about accounting and audit teams, and it was kind of a workplace, kind of comedy that kind of showed the dynamic and hit pain points that our clients felt. So we just wanted to create something that was entertaining, that kind of helped push the pain point that people end up buying our software for. But at the end of the day, it's just creating something really interesting that will help you build an audience over time. Depending on what you want to do and what talent you have, and you don't really need to have a lot of talent, right? As long as you can kind of spit some really good, interesting conversation out, you don't need much. A podcast is kind of for me kind of a baseline for that stuff, especially because people don't really like to get in front of the camera, but you and I, we make it work. But really revolve around the show concept, right? Create the theme, have the purpose. I'm not talking about just pumping out little pieces of content here and there that don't have a narrative. I think there's something to be said about creating that narrative over time and helping to build an audience. So, I mean, what do you think? I mean, we've done the podcast thing. We do this video show. Are there any other sort of media types that you think businesses can kind of marketers can tap into to help with this concept?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of show, I'm almost not even thinking about format anymore, like podcast or video or things like that. I'm just thinking any possible, even an email newsletter you could turn into a show.
Yeah.
It just, show is kind of a term that we're using for serialized episodic content that builds on each other, that's connected from atom to atom. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it doesn't matter really the format. Like you said, it's what are your resources and what are your goals? I think those are the two most important things. And then you can kind of tie back from there. And you mentioned talent's not important, and I understand what you mean there. But at the same time, I think what you mean is on-air talent. You don't need to be a formal broadcaster.
Yeah, you don't need to be a personality per se. You just need to be comfortable to start doing it.
Yeah, I think in this context, talent is passion and interest around your product or industry. I think it's just expertise, being informative. That's the talent that you need to harness. And whether you're filming it yourself or you hire someone to be part of a team that like films it and edits it and does it for you, those are the details that you figure out after the fact. But it's understanding like, what do you have to say? How does it align to your goals? And then what resources do you have available to execute? And then to add on to some of the things that you said, like, why is a show important? To me, the number one reason is consistency. So when marketers are talking about we need to do more content, that just by default, that's piece after piece after piece after piece, here, there, everywhere. And the biggest hurdle that they have to get over after developing that initial content calendar, if they're smart enough to start there, is doing it consistently over time, week after week, month after month. A show has that built in by definition. A show is serialized. It happens on a very regular basis. So by starting with a show, you are consistent from the get-go. So I love that aspect of it, and I think that's super important. The next one is developing a pillar piece of content. A show, is a more highly produced, more resources go into this. So this is a bigger piece of content that you're putting out there. And from there, you can cut and snip and repurpose all different pieces out of that. The 60-second soundbite that goes on Facebook, or the GIF that comes out of it that gets shared on Twitter. It's like you can repurpose these micro pieces of content that fuels your content strategy across social media. So that's another reason why I love shows, is because you can focus on one big thing and then let that feed everything else. And that can keep you really busy depending on how much internal resources you have.
Yeah, and I want to kind of like touch on that a little bit, because I don't want people to kind of skip over the fact that we're not necessarily discussing creating this one long piece of content and just like putting out this same thing across the platforms. Like, you got to think very native about really native about the platform and creating content specific to that platform that speaks to the specific audience that is consuming it within that context.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we have a show in our content calendar that goes deep on publishing a piece of content and then repurposing and developing native formats for the specific channel. So we'll do a whole 10 minutes just on that in a couple weeks.
Yeah, I think the takeaway for that is just, it goes back to your first point about consistency. Like, you're creating consistency from the episode perspective, but also consistency on the distribution and making sure that your social channels are being updated along the way as well.
Yeah, you're everywhere, and you're everywhere consistently. The last piece that I want to touch on, I think, is an important one with the show, and it's hand in hand with consistency, is that a show, the format, is a consistent format, enables you to reinforce your brand's philosophy, your brand's values, the personality of your brand. Like, you can do that in one-off pieces of content that go everywhere, but with a show, you have this infrastructure that's really constant, and it's something that people start to expect. They develop a relationship with the host and the talent on the show, and therefore by default an extension of the brand itself. So this is a way to indoctrinate your audience to the way that your brand thinks, and ultimately why your brand is different from competitors in your marketplace. And done so over time, when that person's ready to approach like a transaction moment, they're not just saying brand A versus brand B. They already have this deep relationship with you. They already know the way you guys think and the way your team executes at a high level through being a part of your show and watching the show and soaking that in. So it gives you such a huge competitive advantage when it comes to that moment that, we talked about ROI from content last week. Like, this is the invisible line that is being drawn that is so hard to connect, but it's there. We know it's there. We're all a part of those transactions on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's a lot of reasons to make shows, but I think we just touch on a lot of really important ones that it's a no-brainer to me at this point.
Yeah, and this kind of goes to like the short-term minded marketers that are all about driving traffic and demand gen. Like, there's times and places for all that stuff, but this whole concept of a show is about long-term building of an audience, creating a community around what your brand represents, which I think, as you said, at the end of the day, you're going to pick that brand that you know and trust and feel this loyalty to, than you would over brand A that isn't doing anything like this.
Yeah, totally. And I think we touched on this earlier. This is the most meta discussion ever, because we are creating a show. The brand is our personal brand, so there's no actual like business connected to this just yet, but you know, this is our personal brands that we're connecting a show to. So it's super relevant to what we're doing in this moment, and we're figuring this out as we go, and every episode's going to change a little bit, and we'll figure out our concept and our infrastructure on how we're executing this. But yeah, if anybody watching here, if you're developing a show, if you're thinking about a show, what are your thoughts on shows? Who's developing them? What do you like about them? Which ones do you watch? I think I'm always looking to see what shows people are watching in terms of business content that you're really liking, that's new and fresh. It's not the same old thing. Hit us up in the comments of wherever you're watching this and let us know. All right, that's it for this week. We will be back next week with some more marketing.
And coffee. See you guys next week.
Cheers.